You guys are doing a great thing. It's such an uncomfortable topic to talk about, especially for a guy, young guys in their early 20s. And, I'm glad that, I could tune in and, listen to you guys.
Spencer Kobren's The Bald Truth.
Hey guys, welcome to the broadcast. 888-659-3727 is the toll-free number. Thank you so much for hanging out and tuning in. It's great to be here. Anyone who may have just found us through my Instagram, I did send you a direct link to the Hair Transplant Mentors Hair Transplant channel. That's Joseph Tillman, who's on your left, in case you have no idea who that is.
That's exclusive content from Spencer Kobren as well, only for followers of Spencer Kobren on Instagram.
Yeah.
And anyone else I send it to.
Instagram. So. Jesus. I have to say, I gotta tell you guys, look, I love being able to inform everybody and continue to tell people, the truth about this industry. And there are people who really do appreciate it. But the sheer level of nonsense that I receive online and the amount of DMs that I'm getting, like, I don't know how people even survive in this world when I think about some of the questions that they ask me.
I still love the one from last week where guys like, look, I don't have time to read this whole thing that you sent me in DM. Can you just tell me the cure?
Yeah.
Can you just tell me what I need to do?
So we write a really detailed article that's posted on the American Hair Loss Association website. That is checked out by physicians with the thumbs up. It's posted on there with some really, vital information about the questions that all of these guys are asking, whether it's about low-level laser light therapy or differences between LED and LLT and, the reality of microneedling, including all the possible disadvantages, especially the way people are doing it today. So I put out a 45-second reel, get these guys' attention. They want to know what's up. And it's kind of like, all right, well, if you want some more information, just make the comment here. We'll send you a DM, and you can read about it. And this effing guy actually writes me. He goes, too long to read. Just tell me, give me the solution.
Yeah.
And this
was
is
he referring to the article or to the DM?
DM was three words, but yeah, it's possible. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it was the article. But I just pulled a Rogan on that one. You ever see? I don't know what I'm going to say, but I will say that it's fascinating to me. And the younger, as I get older, and the more I start to correspond with this most recent generation, I realize, all right, I may have had a short attention span for a guy in my time, for a baby boomer / Gen Xer. I'm like on the cusp. That's how old I am. But I was able to sit down and read a book. I was able to sit down, if I was really interested in something, and take the time to learn about it, to save my own ass.
Yeah.
These kids...
That was your motivation, to save your own ass.
That's 100%.
You knew early on that there was a lot of misinformation out there.
Well, that was 100%. Well said. My total motivation. No one was willing to really help me. They were willing to rip me off, perform hair transplant surgery on me prematurely, which was insane. I had no visible hair loss. My hair was just shedding. I was going through this telogen effluvium. I was noticing less density. I had no actual areas of visible, or I mean, I did, but really discernible hair loss where you can transplant hair.
Mm-hmm.
When Oren Trike said he'll transplant, try a few, see if I like it.
Just try and just see if you like it.
Yeah.
That blows my mind.
So I went to, I don't know if you kids know what this is, but I went to the library initially. And then I went down to the big library down, on 42nd Street in Manhattan, the big New York Public Library, before all the homeless lived there, when you could actually walk in without it stinking like urine and everything else. There were no computers. I actually had to go through different volumes and go through, what were those cards called that you had to look through?
Oh, the Dewey Decimal cards? Or
Is it Dewey Decimal? Is it the Dewey Decimal?
Well, that was a system for categorizing where books are. But
right. So essentially, you had to go to category, to the catalog, and you pull out this drawer, and you look up the books and see where they are, and you correspond a number and an aisle to where the book is. And if you couldn't find that you would then go to a librarian, and you had to be very specific. And they would send you to the section and maybe help you pick out some books. I would sit there with these massive volumes and read about my situation and learn about what I can do.
Yeah.
It was actually in the library that I learned about the use of herbal supplementation for benign prostate hyperplasia. And I started to study that. I'm like, okay, well, there's a connection here. No one had ever written about that in any published volume for the consumer ever until I did. And I only did that because finasteride was not available to me when I started the balding process. All I had was saw palmetto, Pygium africanum, stinging nettle. Now everyone's selling it. But I guess my point is, and guys, that phone number is 888-659-3727. The reason this industry is it's like close to a $7 billion a year industry now, with 99% of the products and services really don't work, can't help you, is because of all these idiots. If these idiots didn't exist, if these lazy kids didn't exist, they couldn't, these companies couldn't take advantage of them. These hair mills couldn't disfigure them.
Well, it makes perfect sense, why, especially with that one person in mind that said, "Look, it's just too much for me to read. Can you just tell me what I need to know? Like, tell me how to save my hair." It's because of people like that it's grown to a $7 billion a year industry.
Right.
Like, when I think about that guy, it's like, man, I could just tell him anything I wanted, and he'd go buy it, even if it was something I was selling. Like. And if that's what the general public is like now, the younger guys looking for hair loss solutions, maybe I should, because they're just ripe for the picking. Just tell me what I need to know. I can't read this.
I don't disagree with that. And actually, I've said that when these guys fight me about they want to see studies about are there any peer-reviewed, they don't even know what that actually means in this field.
They have no idea what that is.
Peer-reviewed studies about derma rolling damaging hair follicles. I just ignore these kids. There's one guy writes, there's 20 peer-reviewed studies that claim that derma rolling or microneedling grows hair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can guarantee you can't show me one study that refutes that. And if I were to explain how these studies actually work and why there may not be a study that refutes it, however, we know in the industry, all these guys who are like destroying their scalps with microneedles and dermabraning their scalps and putting minoxidil on their scalps are destroying their possibilities for even hair transplant surgery in some cases. They're making their scalps paper thin. They're causing tremendous fibrotic tissue to develop. They're constantly laying down new collagen and then damaging that with SD alcohol and propylene glycol. But if I can't show them a peer-reviewed study, then I'm full of shit. Now, what's the point of me being full of shit? I'm not selling anything that is competing with microneedles. But what I can do is I could start selling derma rollers. And all these idiots 100%. Will buy them. And that's not a bad idea.
I'm starting to consider that. Not lying.
It's sad. It's frustrating. But you know what? Maybe I'm at the point in my life where it's like, you can't beat them, join them. Why not? Why not really just sell out? You know? Why not get involved with one of these water filter companies? Why not? I mean, why not just say, fuck it? No matter what I do for you guys or try to explain to you guys, you will never get it. Now, usually it takes about 2 or 3 years before they come back with nothing but their dicks in their hands and realize how much time they wasted.
And money.
And money.
Yeah.
Let's see what this says. Guys, 888-659-3727. Sorry to vent, but listen.
Good segue.
Yeah, this is what we do. I mean, this is what am I going to do? I try to tell the truth. I get shit for telling the truth. Yeah, I've earned a nice living over the last 30 years. I figured out a way to do it by being honest. However, in my older, at this advanced age, you have hell of a lot easier just to take the checks, sit on the beach, day drink, maybe go down to Key West, whatever it is, and just open up P.O. box and collect checks. And that's on the table, Joe. I'm telling you, that's still on the table. And I'll let everyone know, and then everyone will bitch for a while, and then they'll forget about it, and they'll buy my shit.
They'll buy my shit. That's what you end on, for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's see who this is.
That's good.
Oh, man. Hey, you're on the air. Who's this, and where are you calling from?
Hey, Spence. Hey, Joe. Happy Friday. How are you guys?
Happy Friday. Who's this?
Good.
This is John. This is John calling from California.
John from California.
What's up, John?
Are you on AirPods?
I am. Does it sound kind of crappy?
Yeah, the AirPods suck, brother. I don't know what it is.
Kind of AirPod-y.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get off 1 second. Sorry.
Sure.
Oh my God.
What?
Okay, is that better?
Say it again. Speak.
Hello.
Yes.
How are you guys?
We're good, man. I'm good, at least. How are you?
Good. I just wanted some advice. I wanted to get you guys' advice on how I could start my own derma roller company.
Oh, that is the easiest thing you can possibly do. There's a guy online. He has some sort of I don't know where he's from. He's a foreign guy. He's from another country. And he gives people hair loss advice. And he happens to sell his own derma roller.
Oh, I think I know who it is. Does he kind of sound like this? Hey, guys, Matt Dominance here.
Well, no, that's not him. But does he sell derma roller too? I didn't know. But there's a whole bunch of guys. But there's a guy on Instagram he's been critical of me, which I think it's fine. I mean, whatever. He's promoted what we do. And he's got a decent little following, maybe 20,000 people following or something like that. And he gives people hair loss advice. This is just some guy out of the blue. But in the end, he's selling a product or service. That's just the way that it is. And derma roller is one of the products that I'm pretty sure of. Anyway, go ahead, man.
If you think about it, it's genius, right? Derma rollers, just tell them to throw it away after 1 or 2 uses, or even the derma pens, just tell them to replace their cartridges, and you got them hooked for as long as you want, right?
It's unbelievable, man. It's such a sucker's game.
It's like a prescription model.
Yeah.
For actual prescriptions. You're stuck.
Man.
You got to keep getting it.
Yeah.
So.
In all seriousness, I wanted to call in and get some advice from you guys in terms of treatments.
Sure.
I've been on finasteride for a while. I started off when I was pretty young, like 21, on 1 milligram. And then I added in minoxidil, topical minoxidil. And after a couple years when generic finasteride Proscar was available, I jumped on that. And then, I figured I was young, losing hair. I started pretty young, so it was aggressive. So I went on a full 5 milligram a day dose from the 1 milligram a day, and I stayed on that for about a decade.
Okay.
Once I reached my early 30s, I decided it was time to look into hair transplants, and I consulted with this pretty well-known dermatologist in Vancouver, and he asked what I was using, and I told him, I'm using finasteride minoxidil. I use finasteride at 5 milligrams. No, it was Jeff Donovan.
Sure.
Oh, Donovan, yeah.
Yeah. And he told me, don't take 5 milligrams a day. I gave him my medical history. I have a history of anxiety. It's in my family. And he said that at the 5 milligram dose, people who are prone to anxiety can actually have worse symptoms. So instead, he recommended I move down to 1 milligram finasteride a day for 5 days, and twice a week add in a dutasteride capsule. I tried that for a year, and I ended up with sexual side effects, and I confirmed it with blood tests. It didn't end up good. So I was kind of stuck. I didn't want to go back to my 5 milligram dose. So I kind of
let me ask you this, and I have a lot of respect for Jeff Donovan, and we're going to be working together on a project pretty soon. But did you actually sense that you had a higher levels of anxiety when you're on the 5 milligrams, or did your anxiety start to get worse when you started to deal with sexual side effects?
Well, I guess I wasn't in a relationship at the time, so it bothered me, but maybe not to the degree it would have if I was in a relationship. In terms of whether or not my anxiety was worse on the higher dose, I can't say for certain.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, listen, he's a good guy. He's a good doctor. I understand his reasoning, and I'm of the belief that if you've been on something for a long time with no adverse effects and things were pretty positive in general, that I would stick with that. Now, I don't remember if you told us. I mean, so you were on it for a decade. You went to see Dr. Donovan because you felt you were losing ground, right?
I just wanted to get like his opinion on my scalp, whether I'd be a good candidate for a hair transplant, stuff like that.
Okay. Now, but did you think you were losing ground over that time, or did you think you basically stabilized?
I lost a little on my hairline, but I think everywhere else maintained pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I understand his advice, and I'm not a physician, and we have no idea what the long-term effects, especially when you're starting 5 milligrams a day as a young man. I did that, and then I titrated after a while. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's get to where you are right now.
So. Yeah, the last 5 years after I dropped the dutasteride upon his recommendation was add that low dose dutasteride and the 1 milligram finasteride. It didn't work out, so I dropped the dutasteride, and I've just been doing a half pill of Proscar a day, 2.5 milligrams for like the last 5 years, and I think I've regressed a little more.
Okay.
So now I'm thinking of just moving back to that 5 milligrams, and basically the intention of my call is to see you guys' opinion in terms of long-term use of 5 milligrams. I'm almost 40 now. I've been on the drug for almost 2 decades.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We don't know. We don't have any crystal balls. There's really nothing. There's no evidence out there. I mean, there is some concerns that, the use of finasteride long-term could potentially increase the risk of type 2 diabetes. We don't know. I mean, you have to check your blood sugar. Sometimes, I try to keep mine in check. Mine was slightly higher in the mornings than it should be for a while, and I kind of just worked on my diet. So I don't know if that's related to my finasteride use or not.
Okay.
I mean, these are things you have to check, but there are people who suffer with benign prostate hyperplasia earlier on in life, who may start the drug in their late 20s or mid 30s, even, whatever, or even late 20s, sometimes mid 30s, and they're on it for a long time. And, there's just not enough literature out there. So it's essentially something you just have to, you can talk to Dr. Donovan about or somebody else. but you have been on it for a long time. You know how your body reacts to it. We just don't know. Like, I don't know what's going to happen to me. I've been on the drug for 30 years. Are some of my issues caused by finasteride? I don't know. No idea. What's up, Joe?
One of the side effects I think I read about is you get obsessed about being almost 60.
I'm almost 60.
See, there you go. So, maybe that's one of the side effects.
Yeah. I mean, I recently had a bout of vertigo that I had to get treated. It was really screwed up. And I'm like,
oh, man.
And people were like, right away, they ask you what medications you're on, but right away, at least in the online world, anything that happens to them, they blame finasteride.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So, my advice is you have to go with your gut. I understand why Dr. Donovan took you off the medication. But there are a lot of people who are taking 5 milligrams a day, and they seem to do just fine. So you should talk to your doctor about it.
Here's the part that kind of like got me thinking is there's guys on dutasteride, and dutasteride obliterates DHT.
Yeah.
So even twice a week, dutasteride is stronger than 5 milligrams a day of finasteride, according to some studies I've seen.
I agree
in terms of DHT inhibition. So why would the 5 milligram dose of finasteride cause more, anxiety-related side effects?
I don't know. That actually doesn't make sense to me, and I have not heard of that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I will say that, we always talk about type 1 and type 2, but there's also type 3 5-alpha reductase, and dutasteride inhibits all of that. So to me, the safest bet, just logically, I'm not a doctor, would always be to titrate or raise your finasteride dosage before you get on something that's blocking type 2 and type 3 5-alpha reductase. Because your body's already used to what's happening with blocking type 2. We have a natural model, and so I don't know. I'm not a fan of putting people on dutasteride first.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, I had a bad experience.
My take on this is with regards to your question, why would one give you the side effects and the other one wouldn't? And I think it's a mistake for us to assume because DHT is being blocked, in one way or the other, or one type or the other. I don't think that necessarily is what we need to tie it into, because what we don't talk about is the mechanism in which dutasteride and finasteride work. Just because they're blocking DHT doesn't mean they're doing it the same way. So I think that might
100%.
have something to do with the differences in side effects, side effect profiles with each medication. They act differently. They're not the same medication. So they're blocking DHT, type 2 or all three, but the mechanism for how they're doing it isn't the same. So, and I'm just talking out of my ass right now. I don't know, but that's what makes sense to me as to why there might be a difference in why some people get side effects with one but not with the other. Or, there could be other issues at hand, but I don't think it's 100% safe to just assume that because it's DHT blocking that the issues are different with one or shouldn't be, for that matter.
What?
What about with minoxidil? Have you tried that, oral minoxidil?
No, not oral minoxidil, just topical.
Yeah, because a lot of people are. I mean, this has been going on for a few years now, but a lot of people are coming around to oral minoxidil being a new, almost like a newfound weapon. Like we've had it for 40 years.
Right.
In the fight against hair loss. And it seems, based on the evidence that I've seen and, doctors are talking about, that the oral version of minoxidil is far more effective than topical. Topical doesn't do shit. Like there are some people that have good results, but they're few and far in between. But when you look at the what could be classified as significant improvements with minoxidil, it's 10 times out of 100 or 90 times out of 100, it'll be with oral minoxidil, not topical minoxidil. 2.5 or 5 milligrams, sometimes 10, depending on who you go with. But maybe that's something you could also consider.
Okay.
Like you don't necessarily need to do your 5 milligrams of finasteride if you're supplementing with an adjunct treatment such as oral minoxidil. Maybe that would be something to consider. Like talk to Dr. Donovan about it or some doctor about it, because I'm not a doctor. But that would make sense to me, to where maybe, you know, the 5 milligram finasteride was causing problems, but you're considering going back to it, and that's fine.
No,
but,
it wasn't causing problems. He was fine on it.
Oh, I missed that part there.
Yeah.
So why'd you get off of it?
He got off because he was advised by Dr. Donovan, because he has a history of anxiety, and maybe for other reasons, that he shouldn't be taking 5 milligrams. He should only go down to 1 milligram, and he supplemented that 1 milligram with a low dose of dutasteride once or twice a week.
I disagree with that. Just saying. I don't know all the specifics, but no, I'm just joking around. But regardless, I think that there's nothing wrong with supplementing oral minoxidil with finasteride. Like if you're having an issue with anxiety, if you think that finasteride was causing an issue with your anxiety, like exacerbating it to some degree, then maybe, again, like I was saying, the oral minoxidil could be the solution, where you're not taking quite as much finasteride, or maybe alternating every other day and still taking your oral minoxidil, or some sort of combination. Okay. I mean, talk to Dr. Donovan about it.
You know, when I had
my
greatest anxiety, it was when I was balding rapidly.
For sure. 100%. It doesn't get any worse than that, right?
Yeah. So that's and I suffer with anxiety. I mean, I have all kinds of shit, man. OCD, AD. I guess I'm not hyper, but ADD. I have.
From my understanding, it goes hand in hand, right? OCD is linked to anxiety, which is linked to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I have spelling dyslexia. I mean, I should not be functioning. The fact when I went to grammar school, there was no diagnosis. You were just stupid. And I was okay with that for a while, until I never forget. It was a couple of people, but I was like in the third grade, and that's when, for some reason, in my school we had basically one class. We also had a separate English class and a separate math class, and the English teacher essentially wrote something like because I was writing. We had to write some sort of essay, and she said that I was extremely sophisticated as a writer for an 8-year-old, and she went and told my mother this. And then all of a sudden I was a genius, except I couldn't spell. You know? So, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think we all suffer with a lot of shit. And we just have to kind of learn how to deal with it. And I think that, again, I love Jeff Donovan. I'm going to be working with him on a very specific project soon. And I think he's one of the smarter guys in this industry, in this field.
Yes, yes.
However, you know, medicine is not one size fits all. And it sounds to me that for you, your 5 milligram dose was, you were functioning well. You were able to slow the progression of your hair loss. So, I think switching was, obviously, it didn't work out for you. I'm sorry to hear that. But I think Joe's suggestion is a good one. Like, if you don't want to go back up to the 5 milligram.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea. I got to look into that as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I've seen some crazy results. You know, like guys just all of a sudden they kind of grow like a chia pet, and if they're taking enough finasteride, it keeps their hair. You're hitting the hormonal route pretty well.
Yeah.
But you could also go through a massive shed.
Yeah, they say when you apply it topically, you need some specific enzyme that's genetically predispositioned. I think it's called sulfuryltransferase, something like that.
That's exactly what it is.
And when you take it orally, I guess it bypasses that. You don't need that.
Right. And that's why it only works on about 40% of people who use it topically. It has a very shitty success rate.
Okay.
In general.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you guys for that info. I'll give it a thought. If I do decide to go back to the 5 milligram dose, even though I've been off of it for, say, 5 years at this point, do you think I can get back to where I was before in terms of growth?
You know, it's only been 5 years. Those follicles are still pumping out vellus hair, I'm sure. Yeah. So you never know. And the minoxidil can bring you to that point too.
Yeah.
But again, we have to say this. You need to speak to your doctor about it. But
100%.
You know, it's very possible that you can kind of regroup and get back to where you were, or even better, especially if you add another medication.
And one thing I wanted to say too is none of what I said was a knock on Dr. Donovan. Actually, when I visited him, we had a really good discussion. He's a wealth of information, and the reason I don't see him again is because I can't afford to see him again. I know he has like a very long list of patients that are waiting to see him, and the cost is a bit too much for me. That's the only reason I don't.
How much does it cost to see him?
I think it's in excess of $600 per visit.
Oh my God, that's good for him. Look, that's what's interesting about this industry. You know, if you write enough papers, if you position yourself well, there's a kind of a handful of experts that have a waiting list. There's one here in Irvine. There's Dr. Donovan. There's a couple of other people.
Who's in Irvine? Because I live close by.
I forget her name. She is Eastern European chick. Starts with an M. She's at. I
don't know.
She's at out of UC Irvine. Jesus,
okay, I'll look it up.
Yeah, you can find her. But again, waiting list. I've known people who've gone to her, and it's kind of like it's the same. Basically, they all have the same protocol. And it's all kind of like the same happy horse shit. Not saying, again, I think Dr. Donovan's great. That's why I'm working with him directly on this project. But in my view, everybody's different. Everyone's physiology is slightly different. You really have to listen to the patient.
Yeah.
And you have to say, all right, for whatever reason, this patient seems to be doing well for 2 decades on this medication. Should I suggest that he go off this medication and try something completely different? That's how I would think. Or should we just kind of leave well enough alone and just take the measurements and see where he stands at this point?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know the good intentions were there, but yeah, I hear you.
I would say he's one of the nicest guys in this field.
Absolutely. Very friendly.
But personally, I happen to like him very much. And again, we're working directly together on a very specific project that will be announced probably in about 6 months. And
I'm really happy to hear that.
He's the guy that I chose because I think he's really, not only is he easy to deal with and to work with, he's super smart, and he's got a lot of really good ideas. So. All right, brother.
Yeah, my first impression was he's in it for the right reason. So I'm really happy to hear that you're working with him.
Oh, he is. He's a good dude. Yeah. He's a really good dude.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Listen, good luck. Let us know how you do.
Thanks, guys.
Sure.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, take care, John. Bye-bye.
888-659-3727. That's what I like about Joe. He remembers everyone's name. It's like cheers.
Sometimes. Not every time. I'm terrible with names in general, but for some reason I remembered his.
Let's see who this is.
Because he was respectful. That's why.
Very respectful. Nice guy.
Yes. Good caller.
Hey, you're on the air. Who's this, and where are you calling from?
Hello, this is Alex from San Diego.
Alex from San Diego.
What's up, Alex?
How are you, sir?
I'm all right. How are you fellas today? You seem in a good mood.
I'm not in a bad mood.
Good stuff.
We're all just sitting here waiting for the diagnosis anyway, so why be upset?
I know my
diagnosis. You can't change anything by worrying about it. So.
Yeah. So what was that, caller?
I said I know my diagnosis. I'm balding.
Oh yeah, that's a really
yeah.
It's a really shitty fraternity to be a part of, man. But that's why we're here.
Yeah, that's why we're here. What's going on?
Well, speaking of oral minoxidil, I've been on finasteride for about 7 years, generic, and I think it's kind of keeping things together a little bit. Nothing too drastic there in terms of regrowth, but I've been on oral minoxidil for 1.5 years now, and I think it's kind of thickened things up, but the concern is my hairline. That's my biggest concern, and I've noticed last night the vellus hairs or the kind of peach fuzz in some of those bald spots, some of those receding areas is looking somewhat hair-like. I don't know. It's kind of hard to describe, but it looks different than just like the standard peach fuzz on your skin.
Okay.
It's kind of like barely coming back there a little bit. Like,
so you're noticing
almost
some pigment?
No pigment yet, but just almost like as if it's showing some signs of life.
Okay.
Like reversing just barely, like kind of coming up for air or something.
Yeah.
But it's still sort of like peach fuzz, but it's a more of a thicker peach fuzz than I have anywhere else. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of wondering maybe what the next step is in terms of potentially adding something into my regimen.
I would say prayer.
Yep.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're doing the right thing. And you know, how long have you been on oral minoxidil?
About 1.5 years, and most of that time it's been 3.75 milligrams per day.
Okay. Now, did you notice any heavy shedding?
I think I went through a little bit of a shed at first when I started taking it, but it wasn't as bad as when I was using topical Rogaine.
That's great.
That was a worse shed.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Less worse of a shed for sure. Yeah.
So you kind of got past that. It wasn't that bad. I mean,
yeah.
All right. So what would you know? Do you know what your Norwood classification is, or can you describe your hair loss a little bit more?
Yeah, deep 3, maybe a 4, but the Jude Law Island is what I got.
Okay.
It's basically the same.
Okay.
Now, are you happy with that? Do you think, like, if you're able to preserve that, would you be like, okay?
You know, I'm kind of working with it now, but it's a heavy hair fiber situation, and I'm never fully comfortable. I'm always kind of bothered and uncomfortable pretty much at all times. So that's why I've considered surgery, but I'm trying to think before I do that if there's something else maybe to add in before that.
And
but it would
how
be
old
great.
Are you again?
35.
Okay. Well, I mean, you're not incredibly young. You're young though. And so this is not a terrible time to think, if you are a candidate for surgery, to consider it. However, you know, you want to do everything you can, like you just said, to try to promote or maintain the hair that you have and try to promote some new hair growth. It seems to me like you're doing a lot. You're on finasteride. You're on oral minoxidil. What else would you consider adding in?
Well, it seems like you guys aren't big on derma rolling or that kind of stuff, but that's been a consideration or a curiosity, I would say.
It's not that I'm not big on it. I just think that, you know, people are really damaging their scalps because they're overdoing it, and they're essentially being told, at least online, to abrade their skin and then add topicals like that contain propylene glycol, SD alcohol. And what these TikTok docs and these influencers aren't telling patients is that they're actually damaging their skin when they do that. They're killing skin cells. And if they continue to derma roll over a long period of time on a regular basis, like daily or, 3 or 4 days a week, like these kids are doing, they're damaging their scalps, and they're going to eventually inhibit hair growth. But if you wanted to derma roll once a week and not apply any topicals after you do that, you can probably safely do that and see if you're getting any response, especially in the area where you see that thickening of vellus hairs. But but if you see any growth, once you start to see things start to become pigmented, let the medication do the job. Don't continue to derma roll. That would be my advice.
The problem with derma rolling and microneedling is we live in a society where more is considered to be better. So I've seen this so many times where there are a lot of guys out there that will microneedle their scalp, and they do it to the point where they're bleeding because they feel like they really got to get in there. You know, it's like, the more wounding I do, the more positive response I'll get. Or like Spencer said, like, if you start to see some pigmented hairs develop, don't continue to try to get more. But a lot of guys do that. And so I think it's difficult to exercise restraint when you see some sort of positive outcome in these situations, which is rare. You start to really dig in and try to create more of a response, and that's a huge mistake. And personally, I've grown to the point where I think microneedling in general for hair loss, forgive me to all the people that use microneedling, I think it's stupid. Like, when you think about it, you're damaging your scalp on purpose just to grow some hair. Like, at what point do we say enough is enough to try and fight hair loss? I get it. We want to try and do everything. I considered it for a while, but then I thought to myself, what am I thinking about this for? Like, I got these needles here. I can see it for like PRP and stuff like that. There's a legitimate purpose for it. But just to be doing it for the sake of growing some hair without any sort of treatment that you're trying to supercharge, I don't think it's a good idea.
Look, the bottom line is that there's no clinical data that goes past, I'd say, 24 weeks. And correct me if I'm wrong. And, all the data that's legit really just describes a weekly application or a weekly, a procedure. And like Joe said, these kids are doing it every day. And then they're applying minoxidil on top of it. There was one study that all these other so-called clinical trials, and they're not even trials, they're like, they're like essentially in-office studies. And then there's kind of like a compilation of studies, people do an essay of all different studies, and they assess, 1,000 people. And yeah, we do know that derma rolling or braiding the skin can increase hair growth in some instances. But as far as the long term, we don't see any good evidence, and we do know, at least in clinic and anecdotally, people are damaging their scalps. So to me, if you want to try it, it's not going to hurt you if you do it reasonably. You want to use no more than a 0.5 millimeter, I would say, 0.5, and see if you can get a little extra growth in the vellus area, but don't do it more than once a week.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, and I remember you saying something about it could potentially compromise your candidacy for surgery in the future. Like, if you did it too much, is that true?
Absolutely. No one wants to talk about that. But then when you're in the hallways of these meetings, doctors are talking about how these kids are effing themselves up with minoxidil and derma rolling.
Yeah. Seems pretty hot right now on the internet.
It's incredibly hot. I just saw another dermatologist talking about it, and she's doing it on herself. And I'm thinking, first of all, this woman looks like she has a completely full head of hair. So I don't know if she's doing it prophylactically or what. But
which is even dumber.
Yeah, it really is. I think it's misleading, and I think it could really damage people because people don't have restraint. They don't understand that more doesn't equal, better, especially in cases like this. But I do think there's valid evidence that shows that derma rolling or microneedling can increase hair follicle counts in specific areas, but it has to be done in a very specific way and no more than once a week.
Fair enough. Yeah, well said. I'll be cautious with that, I think.
Yeah. But unlike Joe, I don't think there's any issue with trying it. I think it could benefit you in your particular case, possibly.
Gotcha. Yeah, or just wait for PP405.
It's exciting. Jesus. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't hold my breath about anything at this point.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks, guys.
All right,
Appreciate
brother.
it. I'll
Take
let you
care.
know how it goes. All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Good luck,
Bye-bye.
Alex. Keep us updated. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
888-659-3727. Jumping the camera on you for a sec. So take it away.
Okay, so I'm assuming there's no callers. That's a big negative. Okay. Anyway, so we never got to the reason why we named the show, or I named the show, Why Natural Matters. And while the show started, it was really interesting. Someone sent me a link to a result, and Spencer even asked me what I'm looking at or what's wrong because of the expression on my face. And I can't show it because it's private, but it just reinforces the carnage, or the fact that there's carnage going on in this industry where people don't understand what natural means until it's too late. And I got the idea for this because I was on one of the Facebook groups earlier today answering some questions about surgeries and individual cases. I do that every once in a while.
It's very kind of you, actually.
But very, very charitable of me, I might say.
Yeah, magnanimous would be the word.
But I saw this case. It just kind of blew me away about how uninformed the patient was. He'd already had a surgery, 5,000 grafts in Turkey with a doctor. I do know who the doctor is. I don't work with him, never have worked with him, but I know who he is. And his concern about getting another surgery was for the crown, because he said that his crown just continued to get worse. And someone asked him the question, well, aren't you on medication? And he goes on to explain how he's been on some sort of unrelated to hair loss medication. I think it might have been some sort of deficiency with one of his internal organs, so he was taking something for that. He didn't even understand the concept of the question. He didn't understand the concept of, are you taking medication for your hair loss? Not for your liver or whatever it was he was it's like, fuck, like, get with the program. So there was that issue, which, neither here nor there at this point. But I'm looking at it as a result, and the doctor is supposedly making a recommendation for a second surgery for the crown, which is really big. Anything less than 3,000 grafts in that crown, he won't be happy. He'd already had 5,000 grafts, which didn't look like 5,000 grafts, and his donor area was absolutely decimated. I'm scratching my head wondering, where's this hair going to come from? And no one said anything about his hairline. When he's pulling his hairline back, just to show that he had this work done, it was Plug City.
Sure.
Absolute Plug City. So we got this guy who has a pluggy hairline, thin coverage at best on top after supposedly 5,000 grafts. Maybe it's 5,000 hairs. I don't know. A huge crown and a donor area that looks like he may have 1,000 grafts at best remaining. Like you can already see clear through to his scalp, and it's not a buzz cut either. It's probably 2 inch. The donor hair is probably 2 inches long, with some patches where maybe some viable hair remains. But I was just reminded about the lack of situational awareness of a lot of patients today. They have no idea what they have on their head. And the people that are judging his result can't even pick out the fact, or if they did, they didn't say anything. There's like 30 comments on it by the time I clicked out, that his hairline looked like ant legs on growth hormone.
Well, I think that's the problem.
3 hair, 4 hair grafts.
I think that's the problem today, is that hair transplant surgery, at least in today's market, consumers believe that hair transplant surgery is supposed to look like you had a hair transplant. It's like it's supposed to look like like when someone gets their lips done or their boobs done. That's what they
bizarre. The most bizarre thing that I can't process that. That is so bizarre.
No, but
It's
brother,
such a foreign
that
concept.
is the new normal of this field, and that's why it's so difficult for us to do what we do, because people are like, "What are you talking about? That looks great."
Yeah. Yeah, it's about the height or the shape, not the naturalness, not the use of proper single hair grafts, not the use of proper single hair grafts angled. Even if they're multis in the hairline, like they're not even angled properly. These people have no idea what proper angulation means.
Brother,
Direction,
this
angle,
whole
all that
Chris
good stuff.
Buns, whatever his name is, that bodybuilder.
Bumstead.
That
Bumstead,
whole discussion. When I see people saying, "Well, it's better than being bald," or "It looks fine," or "What's wrong with that?"
Everything's wrong with that.
Yeah, but it's absolutely amazing to me that maybe this poor guy doesn't realize, and I hate to say it, but he is a well-known person. People are having hair transplants at this particular clinic based on his results. And what these guys don't realize is not only is he disfigured now, but what's going to happen to him by the time he's 35 is going to be a disaster that he could never have imagined.
Yeah. Yeah. Bumstead's losing his hair behind it, by the way, I think. I think he's got more hair loss behind where the hairline was placed.
Yeah, but I don't think that he would have had surgery. I really don't, if this wasn't pushed on him. I believe, and I don't know the exact scenario, but I believe that someone reached out to him from this clinic, because I know there's another bodybuilder
I don't doubt it.
who's claiming that happened with him, and he's not going. I think he's going to end up going to Carlos Wesley, I think, which is great. If he's a candidate, I think he is. And I think they offered this particular bodybuilder or fitness influencer some payment as well, besides the free transplant.
I was offered 10,000 euros and a free hair transplant to go to a specific clinic in Turkey. Not one I work with, not one I have worked with. So, of course, they offered him money. They offered him probably a hell of a lot more than they offered me, too. Like 10,000 euros is nothing to sneeze at. And
so this guy, Chris.
And what's funny is the surgery would normally cost 3,000 euros. So it's like, we'll pay you 10,000 to have something for free that would normally cost you 3,000.
Yeah, and what's interesting is this guy is he's like a god. First of all, he's taking exogenous hormones as part of
everything.
But as part of his work, that's his job. So
he's taking all the hormones.
So it definitely would exacerbate his hair loss, for sure. So he probably figured, wait a second. So they're offering me, this is great. I'm going to get my hair back. I'm going to get a free hair transplant. Who's better than me? Now, this is a guy. What's that noise? This is a guy that looked great with the receding hairline. Would look great, incredible with a shaved head. He's got incredible facial structure. Besides, being the best bodybuilder in the world, I guess, at this point. Yeah. And he could have lived his life with a shaved head, continued the hormones that he's going to take, not have to be worried about the progression of his hair loss. But now he's put into a position where he's screwed. And can he shave his head in the future? It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult, especially given what he's dealing with in the front. He's got thousands of punctate wounds in the back. All these bodybuilders tan, so he's not going to be able to tan because all the scarring, even if he has that grafts removed, he's going to have like a mottled, scarred scalp, and he's going to have thousands of wounds in the back of his head. They screwed this guy, in my opinion. My hope is that at some point I can get to speak with this guy, Chris, once he realizes, if he hasn't realized yet, so then maybe he can warn young men who are going in this direction that, look, this isn't what a hair transplant is supposed to be. I probably shouldn't have had this done. I really wasn't a candidate for hair transplant surgery given the lack of knowledge that I had. And also the fact that I have to continue to take these hormones, at least for now.
Yeah.
Anyway, it pisses me off. It makes me sad.
It is a pisser. Yeah. What do you
You
do?
know, it's sad because these young kids are like, well, at least he's got hair. It's better than being bald. No, it's not. It's not better than being bald. It's not like the old surgeries. Like, you know, you look at Rogan, he had a couple of surgeries and he wasn't happy with it. And he ended up shaving his head and he wasn't a candidate to begin with. And he did have a major strip scar. But at the very least, it was the relatively small number of grafts compared to what's being moved today. They were placed in a manner that really didn't leave much scarring or any that I could see in his recipient area, which is great. There's no cobblestoning. So he was able to shave that off. And, you know, I think he may have had some work done on his scar over the last few years because it looks less visible. But all in all, he was able to shave his head and move on with his life. That's not the case with large FUE surgeries. Can't do it.
Yeah.
You have one option of maybe tattooing those punctate wounds, and that doesn't always look good.
No.
Almost everyone coming from that part of the world who's getting a hair transplant today, who's decided to have surgery today, is going to be miserable in a few years.
But I can tell you that the idea of it's better than being bald, from personal experience, it's not. Having a bad hair transplant is not better than being bald.
Yeah.
Been there, done that. And I would have been happy to shave.
This situation might be, but not surgery.
No. So that's the point of the name of today's show. Natural.
All right, let's take a call.
Why it matters.
Hey, you're on the air. Who's this and where are you calling from?
Hey, guys. This is Ryan. I've called you guys probably twice in the last couple of years.
Ryan, where are you calling from?
Hey, Ryan.
I'm in Florida.
Hey.
I think last time I was in L.A.
All right,
But,
welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I just always, I love the show. You guys are so great to do this. And I think that, being 40, last time I talked to you, Joe, I was talking to you about finasteride, and I was saying, I've been on ProScar for a long time, and maybe I should go to Propecia because we talked about brand names and efficacy and all that stuff. And I just thought I'd kind of come back and kind of, give the listeners and also ask you guys some questions. I switched over to dutasteride, had a crazy shed, crazy shed that was just devastating. And then kind of came back. And now I'm not losing any hair. Now it's very strange because it's like I can't really tell if the density's there, but I'm not proficient enough to take the photos like I should probably over. But I talked to my barber and I asked him, hey, how does it look? He says it's definitely thicker, but it was a long, hard journey going through that. And and I questioned you guys last time about getting a transplant. I'm still on the fence. I have enough hair that I can use hair fibers and not worry about it. But I guess what my question is, I may do a transplant at some point, but I think my question is more about, there's been a lot of discussion on the forums and with Kevin Mann and also with KSWR, I think is his name. I can't remember, but they do a lot of scientific studies. And one of them is on Lichen planopilaris, I believe it's called. Maybe I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly.
Lichen planopilaris.
Thank you. Yeah. And I dealt with a lot of seborrheic dermatitis during this time and finally got on, especially I think probably caused by minoxidil or the drying out from the alcohol and the propofol. But I started using an anti-dandruff shampoo and noticed that my head was less scaly. I wasn't doing that. And I was wondering what you guys think about that affliction, because, a lot of it, you have to get a scalp biopsy, and there is this discussion that perhaps it mimics AGA, that there is mild or very small cases of it that aren't specific to a scarring area, like a scarring alopecia, but that it could be, because I have diffuse pattern hair loss, and that it kind of mimics that. So I wanted to know what your guys' thoughts are since you're so knowledgeable on everything.
Well, I've was around. I was working in clinic when Lichen planopilaris was first being. I can't say understood, but recognized as an issue when it comes to hair restoration. And I remember a patient very, very clearly. Actually, he'd already had surgery with a clinic, and he'd come to the clinic while I was working, and he had no real issue with his existing hair transplant, other than the fact that it just didn't really look natural, and he wanted a repair to add naturalness, a little bit of density, really straightforward. There was no unusual pattern to his loss. There were no patches. There was nothing unusual about his recipient scalp whatsoever. So he had his surgery. It was very successful, complete home run, looked fantastic, natural, good density, coverage, the whole 9 yards. 2 years later, he developed a situation where he probably had 2/3 of the hair, maybe half of the hair that had been transplanted, and of course he wanted to know why, like what's going on. And fast forward, just on that case I was dealing with, and then several cases I've dealt with since. Lichen planopilaris is not something that's caused by hair transplant surgery in general. And I bring that up because someone actually sent me a link to a case where a patient went to this really famous doctor, or fairly famous doctor, recently famous doctor, I should say, in I think Indonesia or Malaysia, someplace over there in that region, and he has almost no growth at 6 months, and what he did have was a bad case of folliculitis. Like, I looked at the pictures, I'm thinking that almost looks like MRSA. That's not folliculitis, that's MRSA. There's something really bad going on there. And 6 months later, he's got zero hairs growing out of the hairline. And so the issue of Lichen planopilaris came up. That's how I'm tying that in. And the surgery itself is not a cause. So back to my point. What causes Lichen planopilaris? It is a genetic condition. It's triggered by physical trauma, which can be a hair transplant surgery, or it can literally be a knock against the head with a 2x4. It doesn't matter what it is. Physical trauma triggers it, and no one knows why. The issue lies dormant until something triggers it that's traumatic, physically speaking. So it can develop from hair transplant surgery. It can develop from getting hit in the head by a hammer, or whatever. And the way it manifests is the skin in the area that's being affected. It turns not red and scaly like you're talking about. That's a dermatological condition. It turns white and almost waxy in appearance, regardless of the color of your scalp. Like if you have maybe a darker tone to your scalp, it'll be white and waxy in appearance, not so much scaly, and devoid of hair.
Let me interrupt for 1 second, just
go ahead.
To fill in some gaps here. So we know that LPP is a form of cicatricial alopecia, which is scarring alopecia, which I wrote about many years ago, before people really had a good handle on how it occurs and why it occurs. There's a genetic component for sure, but it really is there's an autoimmune component to it. Essentially, your body's attacking your hair follicles, just like alopecia areata. There can be redness and there can be scaling, especially initially. But in your particular case, and what's your name again, caller?
My name's Ryan.
Ryan, sorry. The fact that you're not seeing any shedding at this point, now, sometimes it goes into remission, but that's rare. The fact that you're not seeing any shedding at this point, and you went through the whole dutasteride situation, you went through a shed, now you're not seeing any hair come out, even though you have diffuse hair loss, it really indicates that you don't have this condition, because you would be continuing to shed. If you did a hair pull test in specific areas where you're most diffuse, you would see a lot of hair shedding if it was LPP. And you would probably see, like Joe said, the area would become very pale, depending on your skin color, but it would be like blanched, and it would be completely barren. There would be no hair at all. So it can mimic diffuse androgenetic alopecia for sure, but usually that's the beginning stages. Also, a condition called, alopecia incognita or incognito can mimic male pattern or female pattern hair loss as well. To me, and I'm not a doctor, it doesn't sound like you're dealing with any of those, given the fact that you've been able to kind of do pretty well on medication. You switch medications. You went through a shed, which is pretty normal, and now you're at a point where you're not shedding at all. Like you can't even see any hair, and your hair looks thicker. That's usually not the case with these diseases.
Okay. That's good to know.
With Lichen planopilaris, I've never heard of that happening. So you're good.
Okay. Yeah, because it's kind of confusing, I mean, because obviously, if you have diffuse loss, I'm just wondering, in general, is there a possibility that there is a mild form of this that is not as, because, I never got like a itchy red scalp. I got more of a flaky white skin at the back of my scalp, mostly. And sometimes, I mean, it was dermatitis for sure, because it changed. And I did decide to get some clobesterol and just try it for a week or so and put a little bit on and see if it did. But I didn't, I'm not a scientist. I didn't use myself as a guinea pig, which I probably should have. But I think that's really good to know. I just think it's interesting to think about, are these conditions, compounding the effect? Because I've been dealing with my hair loss since I was 15 years old. I wish I would have gotten on finasteride then. I got on finasteride when I was 18, and then I went off, and then I went on, and I went off, and I went on.
Well, you're better off.
Everybody in my family.
You're better off you didn't get on when you were 15 years old.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I didn't get fully on. But, I didn't really start taking it religiously until I was 25, and then I had moments when I was like, I don't want to take this anymore. And then I went through the whole ED scare, and something wrong with me.
The bottom line here is that there are really well-trained physicians out there that can kind of get an idea if you have LPP or any other scarring alopecia without having to take a scalp biopsy, believe it or not. So you can actually see the telltale signs through dermoscopy. So if you want to get yourself checked out, you can. But it doesn't sound to me, I mean, you definitely have some inflammatory factors, but male pattern baldness, now it used to be considered considered a non-inflammatory form of alopecia. Now it's in the books as there's partial inflammation. There's inflammatory factors with most people who are dealing with male pattern hair loss. So yours may just be, worse, and you could have other conditions as well, but it doesn't sound to me like you have any type of scarring alopecia. But I'm not a doctor, and I can't see your scalp.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. You're doing the Lord's work, and we all really appreciate it out here. And I have one last question. Where do you guys see? I mean, I know that you guys have talked about this a few times on it, but where do you see the robotics in the next couple of years with hair transplantation? Do you think that that's going to take over? Do you think that it's going to get much more effective? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
My personal thoughts?
Well,
no.
My personal thought is, with like, as far as the current state of the industry for robotics, as far as I'm concerned, it's dead. There are some holdouts, some clinics that are still using the robot, and they're doing a fantastic job of it, I might say. Just a few, maybe 3 or 4 that I can think of off the top of my head. Aaron Nussbaum, Ken Anderson, when he uses it, he does a good job with it.
Bernstein, Shaver.
Bernstein, what's his name in Connecticut?
Bowden.
With a Bowden, yeah, Dr. Bowden. But in general, I see it as dead. I don't see. I'm sure that they've gotten much more smaller as far as their market share goes. This is just speculation. I don't know. I can't see that it has grown any, and I don't see it growing with the current state of how they're doing things. Now, with the way that AI has exploded, or machine learning, which is what it is in most cases, there's no reason why someone can't come out with a better wheel than what's out there right now.
It's interesting that you say that, because a few years ago I decided I didn't do it, but I was thinking about like developing an exoskeletal arm. Something just recently came out in the field. It's not ready for prime time, but I do think that essentially making it dummy proof for physicians to actually perform this surgery and technicians to actually perform this surgery is a possibility using some sort of apparatus like that.
Yeah.
And it'll take away the fatigue factor. It'll make things more precise. They'll be able to actually look, beyond the skin. You have to understand that FUE, even under high-powered magnification, is basically a blind procedure. So, using, ultrasound, like sonograms and exoskeletal arms with the right instrumentation, I don't think that is something I think that's something that's going to happen. Now, we don't know if the end of hair loss is going to happen before that happens. We don't know if there's going to be better, more effective treatments, at least, where surgery may not be necessary. But if surgery continues, I think that's probably the direction it's going to go into.
Yeah. Good answer.
Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate it a lot, and have a great night.
All right, brother. Take care. Good luck.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, and then there's going to be, all right, who's going to be able to utilize this technology? Will there need to be a doctor in the room?
Good question.
Yeah.
Inquiring minds want to know. It was a good question. I hadn't thought of it in quite a while, but it makes sense that, what's out there now, not so much, but there's nothing to say that someone won't come along and take advantage of the way that things have been changing with machine learning and apply that to some sort of new way of using quote unquote robotics of some sort to some degree to at least enhance or augment the procedure as it stands today.
Right.
Who knows?
I think it's going to be something that has to be attached to a human, and that's going to make a human more proficient and take away a lot of the X factor or the questions, and make the procedure much more precise. And you have to understand, when you're dealing with a piece of equipment just working on a human being, scalp isn't completely flat. There's all types of variants every time you take out a punch. It's just, in my view, there are some doctors who are able to utilize it because they're real hair transplant surgeons who took a lot of time to learn how to finesse this piece of equipment. And to give full disclosure, I was a consultant for the company for like 2 years trying to help them better this piece of equipment. I still don't think it's ready for prime time in most people's hands. I can think of maybe 5 people who use that robot effectively, who are not harming patients, and where it's actually a benefit to patients.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And that's sad. That's really sad.
Yeah, and I can tell you that the market share is closing in on them. I mean, there's no way if they're selling equipment, if they're still selling those devices, they're selling them to physicians who really are not in the know, in my view. They don't really have a grasp of how difficult and elegant and nuanced this surgery is, how difficult it is to perform well with, handheld instrumentation. But to try to use an apparatus like that and get consistent results, I mean, I just haven't seen it except for, like I said, maybe 4 or 5 doctors, maybe 4. I think it's Shaver, Bernstein, right? They work together. You have Bowden, who uses it well. You have Nussbaum, who uses it well. I don't think what's his name?
Anderson
uses it
stopped
anymore.
using it, didn't he?
Yeah, I don't think Anderson uses it anymore.
He stopped using it. That's right.
I don't think Bauman uses it, even though he still has it.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong about that. But in most cases, the real hair transplant surgeons in the field are just either try to sell it or it's collecting dust from the knowledge that I have. I mean, Hassan Wong got it.
To sell it 10 years ago.
Yeah, Hassan Wong got it for like a week, and they were like, "What? WTF?"
Yeah, pretty much.
But it did get them into performing FUE.
Yeah,
which I think is very valuable, not only to their practice,
kicking
but
and screaming
to patients.
Kicking and screaming, but they did it.
Yeah, they still would have been the only full strip holdouts if it wasn't for that machine entering their office, if it wasn't for that investment, in my opinion.
Yep.
I mean, you got fellow Bloxham are still FUT holdouts, and I have to tell you that I think that, I'm a fan of just knowing what I know of every physician being able to perform and have the infrastructure to perform FUT, but that's just not the case anymore.
I will share that Jerry Cooley has all but ceased his FUE operations. He still does it on occasion.
I've been told that, not just by you.
But he has decided that for the patients that are coming to him, and for what they're seeking based on his experience and the results that they're looking for, he feels that FUT is still better than FUE. He has nothing against FUE, and he was always very good at it. Make no mistake about it. But he said there's a lot more compromise with FUE than with FUT, because there's so much more you have to be aware of all at the same time. And I understand that. And you know what? I'm actually glad that there's an excellent world-class FUE or FUT surgeon that is keeping the flame alive, at least in his practice, because I think it's needed. There are a lot of patients, more so now than I'd say 5 years ago, that are recognizing the value of a good FUT procedure or 3 before they switch over to FUE for the long term.
Listen, I'm going on record and saying this, and I know our friend in Atlanta this really pissed him off. He claims that I had some sort of conversation with him that doctors told me that FUE is not going to sell, and that's not what I said. What I said during that conversation is, no doctor has to tell me anything. I hate to say it, but I introduced FUE to these doctors, including this guy in Atlanta.
He acknowledged that, or used to.
Yeah, he acknowledged it. He may not acknowledge it now, but it's out there for public consumption.
Yeah.
But what I said was, you cannot provide patients with the best possible options and the best possible hair transplants, especially guys who are destined to be full-blown Norwoods, never coming back, 6s, 7s, 5s. You can't give them the best possible hair transplant just doing FUE. You can't move enough, relatively DHT-resistant hair. You can't get 100% of that sweet spot. You're wasting precious donor. You're leaving them with, for a while it's great. It's an easier recovery. It may seem less, there's no linear scar. If you're using relatively small punches, you're leaving smaller punctate wounds. That's all great. But when I introduced this procedure, after Ray Woods contacted me, I told all these guys, this is an ancillary procedure. You're going to be able to save the lives of those who have been stripped out and disfigured. You're going to be able to offer people more grafts than ever before, doing a hybrid of FUT and FUE. And then there were a handful of guys, including this guy in Atlanta, who wanted to take a chokehold on this thing and all of a sudden promote scarless surgery. And all of a sudden say that performing FUT was not only archaic,
It was barbaric.
But it was barbaric and not in the best interest of the patient. And that is a lie. It's not in the best interest of
lie, man.
Yeah, it's not the best. It's not in the best interest of the physician who's trying to get a chokehold on a certain scarless procedure.
Forget the fact that it costs twice as much.
Right. Absolutely.
Forget that. Like, don't let that be part of your evaluation of why I'm saying this. Sure, it may cost $10 a graft now. And sure, I may not need as many staff members. Yeah. So sure, the profit margin may be supremely larger than when I do I'm not saying that has anything to do with it. I'm just saying it's better for you.
Right.
Forget how much better. I'm not even a part of the equation.
And
it's all about you.
I developed my own procedure and named it something completely different than what it is. And that's the game, you know. When you tell these young kids the true history of FUE, they don't believe. They can't grasp it.
Yeah,
they're being sold state-of-the-art hair transplant surgery. This is, strip is the old technique. We don't do that anymore. That's barbaric.
And I while you were talking earlier, before I went on my little rant, I was waiting for someone to say, but what about that guy that can pull out 10,000 grafts in FUE and he's got the results online? About him.
What the fuck about him? Excuse my French.
It's like the results are there 1 year later. What does it look like in 5 years or 10 years? Where he is at, any doctor out there can actually move 10,000 to 15,000 grafts.
I'm saying any doctor, maybe any technician, but not every doctor.
The point is, it's not rocket science compared to everything else. It's just making sure you're not getting too close to the next one, so that when everything's removed, it doesn't look moth-eaten. But it also has to do with patient selection. Your donor has to be exceptional. None of these thin borderline cases are getting these massive sessions. The numbers don't lie. Like, if there's not enough hair, then that hair can't be moved. No one can just pull hair, out of the ether to make it viable and movable. But the question is, because they have to go along the demarcation from hair to no hair, because they have to go along that borderline from terminal hair to maybe not so terminal hair, what's it going to look like several years from now? Forget antigen synchronization and desynchronization that occurs a year and a half after your surgery, more or less, to where it's already going to look 10% thinner, 15% thinner. How's it going to look 5 years from now when some of those hairs maybe are getting affected by DHT? Like, we don't know. And some cases will be fine for a very long time.
Well, actually,
I also guarantee
we do know.
A lot of cases won't
we do
look
know
so fine.
because we're already seeing these cases come in. We're already seeing cases that guys have moved 10,000 grafts.
I was talking more about a specific doctor that everyone brings up nowadays. But in general, yes, you're right.
Oh, the Brazilian guy and the guy from Bulgaria, those two guys.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, listen, again, I'm gonna say this. Two of the best mechanics I've ever seen. That's what they are. Mm-hmm. They're great mechanics. Using AI and all the happy horse shit does not change a person's physiology, does not change the reality of donor dominance, does not change the relatively new reality that's being talked about of recipient site dominance that no one talks about except behind the curtain in the hallways. Like, wait a second. So when we put these denuded grafts into people's scalps, they don't seem to be lasting as long.
Yeah.
I wonder why. Because there's no buffer. There's no cells that from your donor area that's really buffering it and keeping it growing the way we hoped. Because when Orangereich put this information in writing and was published, they were using big, chunky plugs with a lot of tissue around them. And those hairs did last forever, for years, decades. Mm-hmm. Everyone's lying to you, people. Sorry. It's all a lie.
It's all a lie.
It's all
of it.
It's all nonsense. It's like, look, hair transplant surgery is life-changing. Look at Joe. You can get a great hair transplant. I refer to like Spencer Stevenson, too. I mean, look at his head of hair.
Yeah.
And there are thousands of people who are walking around with great heads of hair decades after their hair transplants. But in today's market, that is not the case. The repair market has quadrupled.
You know what's funny is people were like, well, yeah, but Tillman had to do that in 10 surgeries.
Yeah.
No.
It's hilarious, though.
Yeah, you know I actually keep getting, negative feedback on that, where I'm just trying to be transparent with, everything I've been through, where I include, a body hair test case that we did with Dr. Wong in 2006, one of the first ones out there, where 127 grafts were taken from my chest and placed into a small area in my crown, and like 30% of them grew. They're still growing, blending just fine. No one will be able to tell. I have to include that. I have to include a scar revision, where the occipital region of my donor scar, after 5 surgeries, had stretched to maybe 4, maybe 5 millimeters, and we revised that. Little things like that. I had a test FUE case with Dr. Hassan, 30 grafts at my scalp. It's like, I have to include these, or I thought I had to include. I don't know. Like, maybe people. I shouldn't even talk about those anymore.
Tell me you had 3 surgeries. Move on.
5 legit. Like two bad ones, and then 3 to really repair it. Like that was the bulk of the repair was in 3 surgeries. I guess 4 because I had that hairline job too. But
I opted for the comb over and the paint job. That's it. Leave me alone. Just because I don't
60.
Just because I don't have the hairline that you think someone, whatever, a 25-year-old should have, doesn't mean I have to have surgery. Leave me the F alone.
Exactly. Just leave me alone, people.
I'm almost 60. Anyway. Let's see who this is. Hey, you're on the air. Who's this and where are you calling from?
Spencer.
Yeah. Hello.
How you doing, boss? This is Rez.
Rez, what's happening, brother?
Not too much. How are you? How are you guys doing?
Well, I think we're pretty good.
Pretty good. What's up?
Pretty good. Good, Joe. I hope you had a good trip to, was it India or Turkey?
He went to
England.
Well, actually, he went to England.
It's
kind of the same thing now.
Well, now it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, man, I was listening to your show the other day, and, man, I wish these people would, I understand what it's like for you. You're out there helping people with giving them information. And it seems like with the internet today, people just want to talk shit because they're behind a computer and they know you can't punch them in the face.
Well,
so they just say whatever
true.
they want to say.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
So they're just tough guys behind the keyboard.
Well, brother,
I'm an expert.
I've dealt with this my entire career, though. I mean, I was people try to cancel me before cancel culture actually even existed.
Cancel culture, yeah.
Man.
The guy at the Hair Transplant Network, he's got a channel. He had a couple procedures with, there's an Iranian guy in Beverly Hills, Pars Medical? You know what I'm talking about?
You mean
Parsa Mohebi?
You mean Zeph?
Parsa Mohebi. No, Parsa Mohebi. There's another guy. He's got a channel called the Hair Transplant Network.
Oh,
yeah.
That guy, kid Melvin. Yeah.
Is it Melvin?
Yeah.
Yeah, Melvin. Yeah.
I don't think has he had surgery with Mohebi? I don't think he had surgery with Mohebi.
I don't think he has.
I think he went to he went to Deep, and then he went to India, right?
And he had with Deep, and then he went to Pradeep Sethi.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no, that guy I know who you're talking about. This other guy, he's
actually he went to someone else before Deep, or maybe after Deep as well. But yeah, he's been to 3 different doctors. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, he promotes Zarev a lot, Zarev. Mm-hmm. And I commented, I said, look, maybe you should think twice about Zaref. I said, Spencer's been in the game a long time, and
well, they don't like us over there, man. So,
he was like, well, Spencer could be wrong because they spoke out against FUE way back in the day and said that was going to cause problems. I said, Spencer never spoke out against FUE. And secondly, you claim that everything's going to be safe now. He goes, well, I'm 40 and I don't have any issues. I had an FUE. I go, just wait. I said, Spencer didn't have retrograde alopecia till almost in his 50s, and I didn't even have it until my late 40s. So just because you haven't had it yet doesn't mean anything.
But, it's interesting that, this kid, and this is what's interesting about this kid. People have sent me stuff that he's written about us or about me, and he has no real information. He's relatively new to the game. Yeah. He has a boss that, there's a lot of fucked up information out there, and it was all based on competition and all this stuff. Yeah. Just the fact that he said that I was anti-FU is hilarious because it really shows a tremendous lack of knowledge of the true history of this field. Now, it has nothing to do with his experience and what he's been through, and I'm glad that he's doing well with his hair transplant. We want people to be happy. But, he's in a position where he's giving people advice, and he should really know the true history of the industry, not just what his boss tells him or or the hearsay on the street.
Yeah, and he had a lot of body hair transplants too. So having 6,000 grafts done versus, Zaref having 10, 12,000 grafts is a far cry. Then you're saying, oh, it's completely safe. And I didn't understand why you said it was completely safe until it wasn't safe to do these big procedures until I actually started thinking, well, they're going in all the different zones that aren't possibly permanent zones, which is why you can get that many hairs, right, instead of just the safe zone. So I didn't understand why at first that you were kind of against it a little bit, but now I get it.
Look,
these super big
what we do is very different than what there are people out there who are doing that are, claiming to be patient advocates or whatever it is. I do not sell hair transplant surgery. I will not have online consultations on any of my resources. I tell the truth about everything that goes on in this industry, and I tell the truth about even the physicians who have been accepted into the IHRS for the last 23 years. The guys who are part of what we do have to accept that. They're going to have to accept that I'm going to say surgery is a last resort. They're going to have to accept that I'm going to tell the truth about FUE surgery compared to FUT surgery and what, the pros and cons of both. And just the reality of this incredibly difficult surgery. And they do. The people that work with us do, and they accept that. Anyone who denies that we're out here telling the truth, they need to make a living. That's why they're doing that. That's the only reason.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that they can speak out against, someone like you who I believe is an expert in this. I mean, come on, you're an expert. You've been doing it how long? Both of you guys, Joe and you.
Look, I appreciate that, but that's just one example of and again, I'll give this kid the benefit of the doubt. I mean, there's a level of ignorance there. He doesn't know the truth. He hasn't been given the tools that he needs to really provide people with the best insights and 100% accurate information about the field. He just doesn't have that ability. He was given like a really degraded toolbox. He's got like a screwdriver and a hammer, and that's it.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's a good way of putting it. But I've seen things where he said that he's heard. He didn't say he saw it, but he's heard where I or maybe me and Spencer have said things about how much money he makes or something. I've never said anything like that. I know Spencer has never said anything like that.
How much money who makes?
We don't. Melvin.
How would I know?
And I don't care.
Yeah, it is Melvin.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. And I have to say that I agree with what Spencer's saying, where we don't know what he actually knows, because a lot of the information may have been fed to him from the owner of the website. Melvin wasn't around. Like he wasn't. I don't even think he was on the forums when I was on the forums.
No.
11 years ago. And when I never said this publicly before, but I can go ahead and say now that when I left that forum, I left because I was being bullied by the owner and the administrator of the forum at that time, who's no longer there, because they saw me as a threat. I made the announcement that I was going independent. I was going to start working with doctors, and I was going to be reviewing them, and I was going to share my findings on the forum. And they saw me as a threat, and they actually were contacting doctors and actively trying to tell them not to work with me. How fucked up is that?
It's like deja vu, brother.
Yeah. And this after being the single most valuable contributor on that forum, contributing more content of my own experience and specialty knowledge of this industry on their platform. And suddenly I'm the devil, only because I want to do what I'm doing now. And they saw that as a threat. They were actually I have emails that doctors I was working with received where they were saying, you shouldn't work with Joe Tillman. If you do, like, veiled threats. It was ugly. I remember looking like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? And so I left.
Wow.
And I've been doing, and Spencer actually saw the benefit of what I was doing and said, you know what? Why don't you come on the show? Let's start doing something together.
Of course.
Because he's smart.
Yeah.
Like, and he has no reason to feel threatened. Like, it's just the way that normal people think, you know? And I remember that like it was yesterday, because it was such a...
Dude, I remember when Specs was like,
honestly,
telling me...
I felt like it was a knife in the back after I'd been there for so long.
When Specs was telling me what he wanted...
It was really bizarre.
When Specs was telling me what he was going to do, I was just like, that's fucking great, man. The more the merrier. That's the way it should work. But that is not the way things work. And listen, I don't want to get into it, but whatever Joe dealt with in this game, I dealt with 100 times worse, especially at the beginning. It was absolute insanity. And I have to say, it really fortified my work and gave me such a strong foundation in this field. That type of ugliness, it just made me kind of say, you know what? I'm pissing people off. I'm making people upset. People are threatened. I'm doing something right.
Exactly. That's what it comes down to. It's like if people are pissed and worried or trying to stop you, it means there's validity to the approach, you know?
But so, as far as this kid is concerned, I just don't think he knows. You know, I try to give him the benefit of the doubt. I just think he does not know the reality of how this industry was developed and what went on over the years. And, you know, anyone in the field who could say that Joe is not the nicest guy in the world or whatever, they're being brainwashed. I've been in this field for a very long time. There's a handful of people that are really great people. Joe Tillman is one of them.
I am kind of an asshole, though.
No, I agree.
Just a little bit.
Well, you guys both come off as really caring, and that's important. Well, Joe, you worked for Hassan and Wong. And Wong, you know, Hassan and Wong, that guy used to do
for 11 years.
He did a lot. Is he still in business? Hassan and Wong?
Well, you say he. There's two guys there. So you're
good question.
So he being Hassan or Wong, but the answer is yes. Both of them are still.
It's working. Interesting. We hear nothing about them anymore.
No.
Yeah.
No.
It's as though they don't exist.
They used to be like the top. You know, they were the Zarevs of the late 90s and 2000s. They were like, whoa. Hassan and Wong, they're doing these huge procedures. You know, everybody wanted to go to them back in the day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Brother, there's
actually someone in the chat room.
Do not let Victor
know.
Do not let Victor know that you think he's irrelevant. Do not let that out.
He'll send out a hunting party to find you. No, ironically, there was someone at the beginning, at the top of the show that was in the chat room. I don't recognize the name, but he said that he just he's 20 days out or 10 days out from his second surgery with Hassan Wong. He didn't say which doctor. And he said his first one was 20 years ago when I was still there, and I'd helped him out a lot. So I didn't acknowledge you. So thank you for the comment. I appreciate that. I hope the second one's just as good. So, but yeah, it was kind of cool to see that. I'm sorry?
What was the largest procedure you ever saw Son and Wong do in their clinic? I mean, you're seeing 10, 12,000 grafts now. But yeah.
Dr. Wong was the first one to break 5,000 grafts, and I think 6,000 grafts. And then Dr. Hassan started to do the same. And the biggest one I recall was I still remember the guy's face. I remember meeting him in Spain. He was a Spaniard that came and had 9,000 grafts from one strip. And I even remember the dimensions of the strip. It was 3 centimeters wide by, I think it was 36 centimeters long, maybe 37. He had a large head and a very loose scalp and high density. And I remember one of the things I learned about patient physiology is patients from Spain and in certain areas of Italy tend to have naturally higher density in the donor area and looser scalps. It's just it got to the point where if I'd see where they're coming from with the online consultation, I automatically knew that the probability of them being a better candidate than the average patient was high. So, just a lot of things coming back from that one. But there are many cases. The average, it got to the point where the average case was over 4,000 grafts on any given day. There were 2 or 3 smaller cases, 2,000, 2,500, but 4,000 plus was the norm. It really was, and they were doing a great job at it, really were. But now they don't do it very much.
They were top shelf back. I mean, everybody talked about it on and Wong.
I can tell you,
and they're still top shelf.
I can tell you one reason.
It's just they don't. Yeah.
I can tell you one reason is because Joe Tillman essentially created their entire online presence. And there was another guy that contacted me early on. I had no idea who they were. This is a true story. I rejected Jerry Wong from the IHRS initially because he just didn't have the photos. And he was like, what?
Yeah.
It wasn't that he was bad. He's great. He's one of the best surgeons in the industry. But he just couldn't present his patients. He didn't have enough cases that he was able to present well. So it took him a while to get that to me, and we eventually took him on. But we took Victor on pretty early on. And then the last few years, I've told you guys the story, we decided not to work together for various reasons, and nothing to do with their work. But one reason is one of the doctors contacted me. This is Victor. And he was very upset that he wasn't on Spencer Stevenson's top 25 list, and somehow thought that I should advocate for him. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Why would I not advocate for everyone who's part of the IHRS and just advocate for you? And I was just like, brother, we need to part ways in this one. If you're pissed off about it, I have nothing to do with that. This is a totally different situation. I don't work in that capacity with Spencer Stevenson. So anyway, a lot of interesting politics. This is all kind of like behind the scenes stuff. But yeah, I mean, you got to take stuff on the message forums with a grain of salt. And again, I always like to give this kid the benefit of the doubt. I just don't think he knows better. That's all. I just don't think he has the information.
Well, and his boss might be talking in his ear, like you said, right?
Well, yeah.
I thought he owned that network. I thought he had started it, but I guess he didn't. He works for somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do find that, I mean, I've never taught, I don't know how much money he makes. He can't make much. I mean, I can't imagine.
No.
So I don't know. Why would we even talk about how much money he makes? That sounds kind
minimum wage.
It's
a little
weird.
better.
Well, who knows? And honestly, who cares? Like everyone's got to make a living. If they're going to make something their full-time job, then why not get paid for it?
100%.
I mean,
he should get paid for it.
Yeah, he should. There's nothing. That's one thing I never understood. Like people associating getting paid to be in this industry as being bad. It's like they expect me to be sitting in a fucking cave, pirating my Wi-Fi, doling out life altering information. And my job, if I have one, should be like a garbage collector. Like, nothing against garbage collectors, but it's like, why can't I make a living? Why can't anyone make a living doing something, for other people? I don't understand that. I do believe there are certain ways that should and should not be done, which is how and why I do the things I do and how. But it's like, it's always been weird to me. It's like, oh no, he makes a living in this industry. He must be a bad guy. Why? I never got that.
Right. Brother, I'm so glad that I'm past all of that bullshit.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit.
What was it?
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was going to say, what was it about? Well, I know, Elliot and True. You put True in there back in the late '90s. There weren't a lot of big hair transplant clinics that probably did good work. So the question is if you had to go back, and you had those same people to choose from now, would you have still looked at their work as top shelf? Like, in other words, what was it, for example, about Elliot that you saw his work and you're like, I got to put this guy on the list? Because I know you're real picky, and I know Elliot does great with, hairline work. He's very good, but what was it about them in particular that convinced you to, first of all, put them in the book?
Well, here's the reality. The reality is I took True on first, if I recall correctly, and he was on for quite a long time before Elliot was brought on. So I got the thumbs up from several doctors to bring Elliot on. We took a look at his work. It was very reasonable for the time. But then, as you know, things started to kind of take a turn. So, I don't think Elliot was with the IHS for more than 4 or 5 years in total.
What did you think of his work?
The good work was good. But then when we started to receive some issues and I had to advocate for this kid to get a refund because I thought it was so bad, that's when kind of our hackles went up.
Yeah.
But in general, I would say that he did a lot of, especially for back in the day, it was very reasonable, on many of his patients, but they were smaller cases, reasonable results. But then things started to get a little shaky, and that's when I was just like, look, and he didn't love that, as you know. I think you worked for him, right? So he didn't love the fact that I was very candid. I said, look, I'd like to take your checks. We could always use dues for the organization, but this isn't going to work out because, you got to help this guy. This guy feels like he's damaged.
Did he ever give the money back?
This guy, from what I recall, and again, this is a long time ago. So, but from what I recall, he was able to get a refund, and he was able to get repaired.
Wow, it must have been pretty bad. If you got involved. He was nursing a hangover that day.
It was not. I could say that this kid's results were not good. Now, with that said, there are many doctors who are extremely excellent physicians who have really good, consistent results, who have patients who are very unhappy. This particular patient didn't look good. He was a young guy. I don't think he should have had surgery. The hairline was very aggressive and pluggy, in my view, and he was very unhappy. And this is a really, a good-looking kid, and he felt his life was over. We were able to get him repaired, but he needed the money for it. And I'm glad that, the doctor decided to say, all right, I'll give you a refund.
Did he go back to Elliot for the repairs or somebody else?
No, he went to somebody else.
Got it. That's something. I believe it. Bad.
So I started this in 2001. I don't think he was with us for more than 5 years. Maybe less.
He came on shortly after True. Is that right?
No, not shortly. True was on probably for about 3 or 4 years before Elliot.
Yeah. True's a saint. I mean, True's a good guy. He does all this philanthropy work, and he's always helping people.
And again, I'm just going off my memory, so I don't know exact dates or anything like that. But yeah, and True was always a nice guy, and we always had a good relationship over the years. And there was one time he was on the radio program, and I made a joke about something. He got very upset about it, and I tried to explain to him, "Look, this is a radio show." Yeah. And I realized that there's some people you can joke around with, and some people you might not be able to have a good time with.
Yeah, he's pretty kind of like a serious guy.
Yeah.
It's like I even had a lot of my disagreements with Elliot. Like he's very my way or no way. He's got that typical doctor, real kind of arrogant. They're very arrogant. They think they're always right. He thinks he's always right. And he'd get a couple heaters on and a few glasses of wine, and then sometimes you can't believe, like you said, you can't believe some of the stuff that comes out of these people's mouths. You're like, I can't believe you're a doctor.
Well, it's interesting that you say that.
You really did work in the hair transplant industry.
Yeah.
That alone says you're telling the truth.
Yeah, there are times I've walked into these meetings, or I'm at the bar in these meetings, and I'm just like, "Is this real?"
Some of the drunkest people I've ever seen in a public setting were hair transplant doctors, like falling down on the floor of an elevator. They're so drunk, embarrassing stuff.
Like at least Joe and I, I mean, for the most part. I've gotten drunk maybe once in front of somebody, but we kind of wait until the doctors are sleeping,
and we go off to another part of a casino.
And get loaded.
Yeah,
a quiet area of the casino where no one else is around except a bartender.
Yeah, and they're always right. Regardless of even if they're wrong, you can't ever tell them anything.
Yeah. Well, there's some guys who are physicians who are just very easy to talk to, and they're normal people, but there are people out there, whether they're doctors or some other professionals who, whatever, they went to school, they worked hard, they got a certain position in life, and they may have kind of missed out on some of the kind of normal nuances in life and how to deal with people because they were just so busy studying when they were younger, trying to accomplish what they accomplished. And once they get there, they kind of think, they own the world. And that you're right, there's a lot of arrogance there. But that doesn't go for every physician. I know some really great guys in this industry.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Cole seemed like a cool guy. Dr. Cole, I don't know him, but seems like kind of a good guy. Like he'd be a good guy
to work for.
Cole's an interesting guy, and he can be. He has the capacity to be a fun, guy.
He's fun to drink with.
I can
say that much.
Have a couple laughs with. But then there's the other side of, and there's a lot of people like that. I mean, maybe not as extreme as that guy, but he definitely has the capacity to be a fun guy.
Yeah. Hey, I was trying to think of who you were talking about last week. You said there was a guy who had his name of his website or something on his hat when he
does. That's Dr. Gary Linkoff.
Linkoff?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought this guy was your buddy. You were on the show, and
we're not buddies. I mean, we're not buddies, but it's not. I have nothing against the guy.
Linkoff. Yeah, the guy with he doesn't have any hair.
Yeah. Listen, brother.
I don't know how
Joe's got to wrap it up. Joe's got dinner.
Oh, I was gonna tell you real quick what happened. I went to the dermatologist, and you hear the cats?
Yeah.
I went to the derm, and I'll make it quick. You can let me know what you think. He looked at my scalp. He put one of those glasses on. And this was shocking for me to hear because since about the late mid-'90s, I'd been losing my hair. And he looks at my scalp and he goes, you don't have any scar tissue or smooth scalp. Your entire scalp is filled with vellus hair.
Okay.
And I said, really? I thought all that hair was gone. And he looks at me and he goes, no, I said, how much hair would I have if all that vellus hair grew? He goes, you would have a thick head of hair. So I looked at him. I said, that's, fantastic news, because the whole time I'm thinking that the whole scalp is smooth and scar tissue. And, but as far as I thought, as long as the hairs are growing some hair, that it can be reversed. But I wasn't ever on anything stronger than finasteride in a real small dose. And I finally got on dutasteride and started using the minoxidil every day, and the oral minoxidil, 10 milligrams. So I'm hoping that maybe this vellus hair turns into terminal hair.
Honestly, I mean, the fact that you're on 10 milligrams of oral minoxidil and you have vellus hair, it is possible you can turn some of that around.
Yeah, 100%. How long have you been taking it?
The 10 milligram minoxidil? 2 months. I've only been on the dutasteride
for Christ's sake. That's awesome.
2
months and you got all this vellus hair? Pff, stay the course, brother.
He said your scalp is full of vellus hair, and I'm thinking, like, really?
Yeah,
because
stay the course and call us back in 4 months. Let us know how it's going. Because I suspect, if you got vellus hairs that's visible, at this point, 2 months in, brother, you're on the track.
And let Joe get his dinner.
Yeah, go get your dinner, brother.
All right, brother. Listen.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the call. Thanks for the support. Good talking to you, man.
Thanks, Ryan.
Good luck.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, guys, we got to go. Thank you so much for tuning in. Fun show.
Good calls.
Always love the support. Yes, we're still doing this. Don't ask me why. We'll probably be here next week. Until next time, be strong, God bless, and thank you so much for listening. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for any inconvenience you may have been put to prior to the programme, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. And if you could now leave by the exits at the rear, that'd be splendid. Thank you.